So if you should still be able to see my screen, and this is kind of the reason it was a little bit more complicated, thanks Chelsea for your thumbs up, is I'm trying to get you guys to be able to see my PowerPoint slides. It just makes it a little bit more interactive, right? I just seeing my face, I get it, I'm maybe okay talking in front of the camera, but it's much easier for you guys to pay attention when there's a PowerPoint slide around. So thank you guys for attending. For those of you guys that are here, and for those of you guys watching the replay, also glad that you are able to at least watch this training session. So this is going to be how to get honors from your attending. It's a live session, screencasting it. So if there's any issues with the streaming service, just let me know in the comment section. But let's get to it. Hope you guys enjoy it. So first I want you guys to tell me, have you had any of these thoughts before? Regardless of where you are on your medical journey, what in the world do I have to do to get honors? You may be a clinical student, you may have done a few rotations, or maybe you're just about to start in the next, couple of semesters. You just don't know what to do to get honors. You feel lost, the expectation isn't clear, and even if you've done a few rotations here and there, maybe you just don't have a good enough system to go from step to step where you can just repeat it at every single rotation and still get honors. So is there a nice repeatable way? The answer is going to be yes, because that's what this whole presentation is about. But maybe you said something along the lines of this. I know I've said this, is how do I impress my attending without sucking up? We've all been there, especially if you're a clinical student, where you have a colleague of yours who basically kisses butt of the attending to look impressive. They bring journal articles, they talk about random things, but it comes at your demise. Sometimes you don't want to be that stuck-up student. So how do you take your attending to pay attention to you without doing snobby techniques? And then finally, maybe you've been burned by a difficult rotation, or maybe you've had a tough attending. How do you get past that? How do you get past this feeling that maybe honors is hopeless, maybe you should just aim for near honors or high pass? Maybe it's not worth getting it. I assure you that you can. But quickly, because I know people are going to be watching this video who are new to the YouTube channel, who are new to the MD Journey. Again, my name is Laksh. I am a fourth year medical student, and I have been doing med school vlogging and blogging for the last 2.5 years. And I counted how many students I've helped through emails, courses, books, YouTube, and it's come to 20,000, which is crazy. I love doing this. And so for those of you guys that are at this training, thanks for attending. But I want to teach you guys kind of some of the successes I've had. That's the whole point of the MD Journey, is to share with you my successes and failures. So today I'm going to show you how I was able to use the techniques in this live session to finish med school with a 3.9 GPA. How I was able to get over a 90% honors evaluation. That means if you'd taken all of the facilitators and attendings that I had, basically 9 out of every single 10 gave me an honors on my evals. And typically, at least at my school, is you have maybe about a 10 to 15% honors rate. So, and I think most institutions do it at that rate. So to get at that point is, I consider it to be success. And then finally, I'm going to show you how I was able to do this, which is get evaluations like this one. And hopefully you guys can read it. This actually came from one of my very first rotations in a field that I'm actually going into. And this evaluation that you see on the screen actually ends up in my dean's letter. So residency programs that I applied to can see this. And I'm going to quickly just kind of briefly read through it, which just basically says, Laksh was perhaps the most outstanding student I worked with. He performed at the level of a sub-I or an intern. His verbal presentations were outstanding. His interns and residents both felt that he strongly deserved honors. Even the families of his patients and the patients themselves spontaneously commented on his abilities and compassion. Guys, that's like the cream of the crop when it comes to evals. You want all of those things to be said about you, and this is not the only evaluation that said something along the lines of this. And so I want to show you guys that you can do it too. And so, how do you get honors from your attending? 'Cause it really is just 7 steps away. So I'm going to break down what those 7 steps are. I see some more thumbs up in the chat box, so thank you guys for attending. If you guys have issues with the buffering or anything, just let me know. But if the audio is good, I'm going to keep on going. So let's get into the 7 steps to getting honors. So the first 2 are really about your expectations and this principle that I like to call super honors. So we'll get into that. I think it's pretty cool. But it makes the whole idea of getting honors obtainable. 3 to 4 is really about perfecting your patient management skills. I'm going to give you 3 simple steps on basically I would do this every time I would see a new patient, and it really just made the whole process very simple. Then I'm going to share with you one thing that most med students, especially new clinical students, forget. And I think that if you keep this in mind from day 1 on every single one of your rotations, you really will just knock it out of the park. And then 6, I'm going to talk about how to be a master team player and what that really means in terms of you getting evaluations without, again, being that snobby med student. And then finally, I'm going to share with you my SAF approach to just kind of tie this up and wrap it with a bow and make sure that not only you start the rotation on the right note, but you end it knowing that you get the highest grade possible. At the very end, I have an opportunity for you guys to go on another bonus training. Obviously, I can't give you all the tips on succeeding on your rotations, so I'm going to give you an option to attend another free training. So stick around to the end to understand how to get there. So now the question is, are you ready? We talked about the 7 steps. I showed you kind of what the results can come if you follow these 7 steps. So if you're ready, I want you to comment in the chat box. Let's do this. If you're ready, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to take a sip of water and see if you guys are ready to see all these tips. I'm sure you guys are excited. I see some thumbs up. I see some let's do it. Let me see if I can get a couple more before I move on. Perfect. All right. So let's do this. I think I made you guys wait long enough. So we're going to get into the 7 steps on getting honors by our attendings. It's basically going to go from start to finish, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So step number 1, guys, is really asking for clear expectations from day 1. This is probably some advice that we commonly get on our rotations, but I'm going to be very specific on what you need to ask your attending via in-person interaction or via email if you can't make the in-person interaction, because you really want to know what in the world does your attending even want. And so these are the things that you really need to touch up on in no specific order, but you just don't want to miss any of them. So journal articles. Does your attending want you to bring articles in? The worst case scenarios are when students get feedback from their attendings who they just thought they crushed the rotation, the attending got along with them, and then they get a high pass or a near honors evaluation, and they're shocked. And then their eval says something along the lines of, I wish you had brought in some journal articles. Well, you probably would have brought them in if you knew that that was an expectation. So journal articles, presentations, how do they like you to present the patients? Do they want it to be quick? Do they want you to kind of go through everything? Ask the nitty details. Do they want you to tell them labs that pretty aren't significant? Do they need you to tell them things that happened overnight? Because if some attendings just want you to get through to the meat, and so you really want to ask them how they want you to present. Some people have long preferences. Other people just want you to be really brief. Notes. Sometimes students work really hard on their notes, and their attendings tell them at the very end that they just don't care to read them. They are important. They're a skill that you need to master, but ask of them what they expect of your notes. Are they going to be looking at them? Do they want you to send them something so that way you can kind of focus, whatever it may be? Patient load is another big one. You don't want your attending to tell you at the end that they wish you took more patients. So ask them how many patients they're expecting you to take and make sure you stay around that number, if not try to exceed it in a manageable way. And finally, management. I'm going to get to this more specifically later in one of the tips, but ask them what they expect you to take over in terms of patient care. Do they want you to just be a reporter and you kind of report on the daily goings of a patient in the clinic or the wards, or do they really want you to kind of own the patient like a resident? Usually it's more towards the latter, but get a clear expectation of what all these things are. I promise you then you're going to have a nice framework of understanding, okay, I have to do A, B, and C to at least meet his or her expectation. And it makes the whole process a lot easier. Step number 2, okay. So this is for what I call super honors, and it's not an actual grade for any of you guys getting excited, but super honors is the idea of being your toughest evaluator. Originally I had put to be your toughest critic, but this is really to be looked at in a positive sense. I find that the way I was able to get honors on my evals is that I really honestly didn't care about what my attending or at least what their expectations of me were. As long as I understood the expectations, I always thought my expectations were higher. And this didn't matter what field I was going into, because here's the reason. You want to always ask, what's your end goal and what do you need to improve on the most? For instance, if I was going on a surgery rotation, I never wanted to do surgery, but there are clearly skills that come with doing a surgery rotation that you can never get anywhere else. Things such as like being able to explain to a patient and their family what their procedure is going to be like, what the recovery period is going to be like. Those are skills that I wanted to be able to develop during my 8-week rotation, and I wanted to get to that level. Not my attending, I wanted to get there. So I set that as a goal. I made it as a higher expectation than maybe my attending wanted. When I'm in my internal medicine rotation, that's a field that I want to go into. Instead of just acting like a third year or fourth year, I wanted to go into that rotation acting like a sub-I or an intern. And that's what my evaluation ended up showing. I didn't obviously ask my attending to write that. And so you have to have higher expectations than your attendings have of you. You have to have specific goals. And then the last part is you have to know how you're going to work to get there. So for instance, one thing I love to do is I like to work on my patient interactions, because if your patients like you, then it becomes much easier to get honors. And so every day I would just go home, I drive home, I walk to my car, whatever it may be, and I ask myself, okay, what patient interactions did I have today that went well, and which interactions did I have that maybe I could have improved on? And the latter, I try to wonder, what I can do the next day to make sure those same setbacks don't happen. So going for super honors is really about you being your biggest critic and working one day at a time to get there, because then whatever your attending expected out of you, you're just going to blow that out of the water. So tip number 3, I'm going to get to this tip and let you guys kind of process what we talked about. We got, this is 5 more, so you guys enjoying it? Thumbs up if you are, and then I'm going to take a quick sip of water, and I think you guys will enjoy step 3 and 4. Alright, so I'm getting some thumbs up. Hopefully you guys are all enjoying it, but let's get into number 3, which is understanding that your patient gets you honors, not your attending. Usually we look at it the other way around, right? We think of the person giving us the grade as the person that really, whose opinion we should care for, but it's the patients who can just make it the easiest process if you focus on them. As that evaluation talked about at the start, my patients went up to my attending that wrote that when I wasn't on rounds with her. And one of the wives of the patient went up to her unprompted and started talking about my interactions with her and the family and the patient. This was a patient who was about to get a cancer diagnosis. They were just waiting for a diagnosis and just the workups to be done. And so I was going in there day in and day out working with them, and clearly I hit a nerve, and I made good rapport that she went out of her way to tell my attending about our interactions. So your patients can get you honors because your attendings will take much better notice versus trying to see what journal articles you brought. So understanding that you really need to dominate your patient interactions, and that's what really matters in the first place. So let's talk about, with tip number 3, a 3-step process on just dominating your patient interactions. So tip number 1 is something that I shared throughout the YouTube channel, and it's the idea that you need to make sure they know you best. We always talk about this principle that make sure you know your patient better than anyone on your team, but make sure your patient knows you better than anyone on the team. And I have this quote, I love using it, and it basically says that, my name is X, so my name is Laksh, I'm the med student on the team. I'm gonna have the most time with you as I'm gonna have the most time with you than anyone else on this team. So if there's anything I can do for you, if I can make the stay a little bit easier, please let me know. Again, my name is Laksh. You putting that out there from day one really just makes a difference, because half the time they don't even catch the name of the attending or the residents. But if you can reiterate your name at least twice in an interaction, you're going to be starting at a further starting point. Number 2 is act like they're your family member. How would you want your family members who is hospitalized or in a clinic to be treated? And one of the simplest things you can do is just look at them or go see them more than just once. Typically, the way rounds work is you only see them in the morning, you'll see them again maybe what you're attending. After that, you're just kind of stuck in front of the computer and lectures. You may not see your patient again until the next morning. So I love the 3 times process, where you see your patients during pre-rounding, you see them after lunch, after you've ate, and then before you go home, just quickly stop by and make sure that they're doing okay. A bonus is before they're discharged, because you really start to develop this habit that your patient is really your own. You're not just a supplementary part. They are actually your patient as much as they are the patients of the residents. So treat them like members of your family. And then finally, simplify, clarify, and educate. This is really where you get to develop your relationship with the patient, or you can confirm, do they understand the plan? Obviously they're not as an expert in medical management, medications, diagnoses as you are, and you may not think you don't know enough, but just take the time to ask what they know. If they have any questions, then just simplify as much as you can, because if you can answer questions, they really do look at you as an individual that they can trust, versus their attendings or residents who seem unfortunately rushed often and may not have the time to break things down the way you are. So simplify, clarify, and educate. And if you see them 3 times a day, you're going to be able to have many opportunities to answer any questions they have. They're going to look to you and know you better than anyone on the team, and then they can rave about you to your attending. So all of this just breaks down into basically an evaluation that writing itself by you doing very simple techniques. Now let's get into number 4, which is you got to become the patient's manager. Now remember how I talked about in step number 1, ask your attending what they expect of you in terms of patient management, but you have to show and don't tell. Most med students don't learn this until their latter med school rotations. It's that they need to start managing their patients as if they were the resident or as if they were the attending. Sure, you may not be right half the time. If not, you may not even be right 25% of the time, but you need to make attempts on what you're going to be doing for that patient. So again, these are your patients, so don't wait for your residents or your attendings to make the call. Ask yourself, what would you do? If a patient comes into the clinic or the hospital with their chief complaint, ask yourself what you think it is, and then what steps would you take to diagnose them, treat them, and then propose that to your resident, usually your intern. And you may be on the right track or you may be completely wrong. But the more you start practicing this, the easier it is for you to start suggesting things with confidence. And although you may still be wrong, your attending can see that you're making attempts. And sometimes that's better than the student who is just kind of sitting in the back worrying about giving a wrong answer that they just don't give an answer at all. So become a patient's manager. And this is also where you can start throwing in the journals, right? The question is, how do I show my attending that I'm reading without being a snob like my other classmates? And so one of the things you can do is, if you have a patient with a disease that's common or uncommon, start obviously reading about those conditions. Maybe you have a patient who isn't responding to the normal treatment plan. So start reading about what's the next option. What's option B and C that you can go to, and then suggest it to your attending. Say, hey, I was reading about treatments for a patient with pancreatitis. Obviously, they didn't respond to this. I noticed or I read that you could give this, this, or this. Do you think that's something we could do for this patient? You may be wrong, again, but your attending is actually going to see that you're putting in the effort without being snobby and just kind of stuck up. So become a patient's manager. Now, number 5, and this is the thing that most med students forget, but if you can do this from day one and you can become a patient's manager, honestly, even after 5 steps, you're solid on like getting one of the highest evaluations with very little effort or with very little stress. You obviously have to put in the work, but you have to go ahead and start discharging the patient from day one. And this may turn some heads, what am I talking about? Why would you want to discharge a patient from day one? I'm not saying that you need to get the patient out of the hospital. Obviously, if your patient comes with pneumonia, they're not leaving the next day. But you need to ask yourself, what barriers are there for them to go home? Maybe you have a patient who's older. Are they going to go back to their normal home? Are they going to be going to a family member? Maybe they're going to go in assisted living. That's going to be things you're going to have to start thinking about. Maybe you have to make sure that PT and OT, maybe speech therapy, comes to see them to confirm that they have a safe and stable home environment. Maybe you have somebody that comes in from a poor financial situation. They may be homeless. What are you going to do after they're healthy and ready to go home? You're going to have to start getting the ball rolling on these things. So you as the med student can go ahead and start contacting PT and OT and contacting social work and talking to assisted livings and start writing up discharge summaries, things that they were going to have to do regardless of when they leave. You're going to have to do those. So start discharging the patient from day one. It's also a good habit that when you're presenting the patient, obviously we say the plan for this patient today is to do A, B, and C. A good thing to add at the very end is saying, okay, before this patient gets discharged, I need to make sure PT sees them. So I already went ahead and put a PT consult. You see that your attending is going to be able to say, okay, that student gets it. This patient needs to get out of the hospital eventually, and they are starting to take ownership of that role and doing things so that way their residents can focus on other things. So this is the thing that most med students forget, but start discharging your patients from day one. Add it to your notes to help you remind you to present that information, and then update it daily so that way you can just make the whole discharge process so much easier for yourself, your resident, and your attending, and also the patient. So wrapping up, let's get into tip number 6. But you gotta be the ultimate team player. I'm gonna be specific here. You gotta be the first to stand up. If the phone rings, the pager goes off, and it's your patient, or it's a patient you know decently well, before your resident gets up, you need to be up there and saying, okay, you know what? I can go look at that. I can go check it out. I can take care of it. Maybe the resident thinks that it's a big enough task that they also have to go, but you standing up first tells them that, okay, this patient or this student is not just waiting for instructions, but they're taking, again, ownership. They're managing, they're acting like a resident, and that's what you want. You want to be a co-resident. Remember that evaluation that I showed you at the very start? They said that I was acting at the level of an intern as a third year. Try to make it your goal to go and act one level higher than where you are. If you're going to try to act like a third year student as a third year student, it's going to be much harder to get honors. But if your expectations of yourself are 1 to 2 levels higher, you're going to start acting differently. You're going to start taking different ownership and perspective of your patients. It's going to be easier for everyone else to see you at least the third year honor student. And so ask yourself, to be a co-resident, what can you do to lessen the load? I mentioned discharge summaries. If your resident allows you to write discharge summaries, create a template and basically keep up to date what the patient's course in a hospital is. For example, when they come in, you can take in your H&P that you wrote and go ahead and summarize it into a few paragraphs, and every single day just add a new sentence on what happened, any major events, because then when it's time for the patient to get discharged, you've already written the discharge summary. You just have to format it a little bit, and your resident doesn't have to spend an hour or two doing it. So you're lessening the load there. As I mentioned, stand up for any small things. If you just need to talk to the patient or answer one of their questions, go and see what they need and let your residents sit there and work at the computer, which they don't always have time to do. So be the ultimate team player, because as much as your patients get you honors, your residents also get you honored, because they will tell your attending. Your attending will specifically ask them for feedback on what they thought of you and what grade you probably should get. So be the ultimate team player. You want your residents to be vouching for you. It makes it much easier for your attending to put that H on your grade report. And let's wrap it up. This is my SAF method, or seek active feedback. Now, this is not the typical, your attending calls you at the very end of the rotation and says, all right, let's talk and let me give you some feedback. No, because that usually is one of two things. Either you did really well and you already knew it, or you thought you did really well and they give you feedback that maybe you didn't expect and you didn't get the grade you wanted. So seeking active feedback is asking early on how you can improve. So if your rotation is 4 weeks, I recommend doing this at the middle of the 2 weeks. If it's an 8-week rotation, do it after 3 or 4 weeks and ask these specific questions. If you can't get your attending to sit down with you, then email these questions. Where can I be better, and what can I do to make the biggest improvement? Those two questions basically allows your attending to start thinking of your skill set, your strengths and your weaknesses, and usually helps them avoid that answer like, oh, you're doing fine. I hated that as a med student because it wasn't clear feedback whatsoever. So ask, where can I be better? Not how am I doing? Now ask, where can I be better and where can I make the biggest improvement? Because you may be doing great, but they may have a kind of suggestion on how you can take it another level. So ask that specific question, because then two things will happen. One, they may give you feedback and you can actually use it for the remaining time. And two, they're starting to think that, okay, this person is clearly interested in becoming the best med student possible. They asked me feedback day one. Their residents and patients are talking highly of them, and they're still asking for feedback. So they're humble and they want to become the best version of themselves. And then finally, just to make this process a little bit easier, provide your own feedback. Usually the end of the rotation feedbacks, they'll ask you how the rotation went, what you learned. So throughout the process, as you're interacting with your patients and residents, think about those kind of golden nuggets that you enjoyed. What were those patient interactions that really kind of made that rotation worth it, even if it wasn't your favorite rotation, or those good memories, and share maybe like one experience with them so they can feel that you took something away aside from just the time with them or the skill sets. So provide your own feedback after they answer your question. So let's quickly go over the takeaways, guys. Those are my 7 techniques. And number 1 is having clear expectations from day 1. 2, you got to be your toughest evaluator and go for super honors. You got to dominate those patient interactions. Remember, your patients give you honors, your attendings just write the grades. 4, manage from day 1. That's the thing that people forget, is keeping discharge in mind. If you go ahead and keep that discharge plan in, you're going to be able to just blow it out of the water. So most students just don't do this. Serve as a co-resident, be the first to stand up and be the ultimate team player, and then seek active feedback. Middle of the rotation, ask those 2 particular questions of where you can be better and where you can make the biggest improvement. But now it's time for some action. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed these 7 tips. I'm obviously going to tell you where you can get that bonus training after this, but I want to take a pause. I've been talking for a while, as I normally do, but to take action, I want you to comment below with what's your biggest takeaway. What's something that you're going to take away on your rotation, 1 through 7, or something totally different that you hope to incorporate into your clinical rotations. So I'm going to take a sip of water, see what you guys say in the comments section. But let me know what your biggest takeaway is. Was this helpful? What did you guys think? Would you want more trainings like this in the future? Just give me a little bit, some information. Yeah. And I'll keep reading those comments as we go through the rest of the PowerPoint presentation. Just a few more slides. Remember, I told you I'll show you how to get that bonus training. Because there is a lag, I'm not going to be waiting too long for comments. So I'll go ahead and answer those at the very end. Just kind of want to see what you guys took away from this. But let's quickly show you I have something new. I always have something new up my sleeves. I'm always working on something new. A quick question, I share some of these things, but do you want to learn how I did the following? Graduated in med school at 3.9. Do you want to learn more strategies on how I achieved honors? These are things, obviously 7 tips works wonders, but I got more of my sleeves where that came from on how to just doing well and just crushing your clinical rotations. Do you want to learn how to make your attendings become your biggest proponent, getting you to residency? Have them write stellar letters of recommendations. Do you want to learn how I was able to find the time somehow to publish 5 journal articles while still doing my clinical rotations? Remember, I did the MD journey, and the biggest growth we saw was in 2018 while I was doing my rotations. During that time, I wrote 3 books, and we worked on some courses and a lot of YouTube videos. It's also when the YouTube channel launched. So I was obviously able to somehow find time to be productive during the busiest year of med school. And then show you also how I did well on my Step 2 exam, how I'm able to help some of my students who asked me about Step 2 CK get higher than a 255. If that sounds interesting to you guys, I have a very cool project introducing the clinical guide. So you guys are familiar with some of my projects before, but the very first project that I did for the MD journey was called a preclinical guide, because after I finished my first 2 years of med school, I was working on basically a guide to show you the tips that I wish I knew from day one. The clinical guide is basically like version number 2 of that. And it's going to teach you all those things I just mentioned in the last slide, plus more. There's so much more that I can teach you about rotations. But the thing is that to help you crush your rotations without the stress, I need your help. I can give you the tips that I think you would want to know, and I'm obviously going to include those in the book, but there's obviously things that you as a clinical student or a future clinical student are going to want to know that maybe I miss out on. So if you want to help me create the clinical guide, provide your input on the content, the book cover, just how I put it together. If you want to do that, I'm going to provide you, for helping me out, a free training on the 9 steps to crush your 3rd year. This is basically a 9-step process on how you go ahead from start to finish on any clinic or wards month. And just know that when you leave home that you did everything in your power to make the most out of that day. So that 9-step process to being efficient and just crushing that rotation. If you want to learn that free training, this is how. You sign up in the link below, or you can go to this link right here, TheMDJourney.com. And basically, you're going to be added to my email list where I give you information on the clinical guide, the content, just some feedback, things like, what should the book cover be like, and more. So if you want to be part of this project, I obviously need as many hands on board as possible. If you want to help me out, then you get to also access that free training. Sign up at the link below. Super excited to see what you guys think, to be able to help me out in that as well. And then let's kind of go and answer some questions. Obviously you guys have been active in the chats, and so let me see now, because I can finally look away from the stream and answer some of what you guys are saying. So let's see. How do you find research opportunities? Is there a school independent way to obtain research? I see. So Jay wants to know, if you're at a big institution or a small institution, what are some good ways to find research opportunities? Obviously, I'm going to try to be brief to avoid making this video a different topic. But some great things you can do is, if you do have some research that's going on, first just see if there's kind of a source at your school. You can also ask your deans for this too. If there's like a list, a website where you can basically see what research projects certain facilitators are working on. Big institutions generally almost always have this. Smaller institutions usually have to dig for this. But that way, once you get the projects that are interesting, you can find those contacts and just email them out, usually with a big BCC saying, hey, I would love to work on a research project. This is what year I am in med school. If you're a clinical student, if we're talking about this, then saying, hey, I'm a 3rd-year med student. I'm trying to get some research experience, and let's just say dermatology, which usually needs some research. I'm looking to do some projects during some of my lighter rotations. Do you have anything in mind that I could work on? Usually they'll give you some projects such as clinical reviews, going through chart reviews. I wrote some review articles, which are a little bit easier to do during my clinical rotations. So those are some great ways to find some research opportunities. But I can make a totally different video on getting research during clinical years, and trust me, that's going to end up in the clinical guide. So hopefully that at least was a little bit helpful. And then, what do you mean by bring in journal articles? Do the preceptors want you to interpret or go hunting for related articles, interesting articles? Okay, so Adrian just wants to know what journal means to bring in journal articles. And so typically as a third year, if you think of the gunner philosophy, right? These are the students that kind of go above and beyond at the demise of others. They're going to bring journal articles on basically any small or big thing that they learn. But what I want you to do is, obviously, when you have a patient, let's just say you have a patient with heart failure, and you're treating them with the typical techniques, and that they're not doing well. Maybe this patient has a kidney problem, which makes them have some issues losing fluid. So you're going to have to look up, how do you treat heart failure with somebody with kidney issues? So then if you look up a journal article that tells you how to teach it or treat that, then you can bring it to your residents, your interns, and your attending and say, hey, I read about how to treat a patient with heart failure with kidney issues, and this is what I said. Do you think we can do the following? So hopefully that makes sense, Adrian. I mean, usually to be an effective med student, you want to be reading at all times about your patient, but to bring in articles, bring in things where you can teach your team without being snobby. So if you find something that's going to be beneficial to your patient, saying, hey, I learned about this, do you think we can apply this, is a much better way than saying, hey, here is an article about this random topic that no one cares about and is not relatable to anything I've learned. That never really ever flies. Usually your residents will just smirk at you. So that's what I mean by bringing in articles. Something interesting or something that relates to your patient that can help further direction. So hopefully that helps, Adrian. If not, just let me know. But just starting to wrap up, I'm still going to hang out after a little bit of the stream to answer some questions if necessary. But if you are new to this channel, or if you're not subscribed, make sure you do. Make sure you like this videos and make sure this streams gets to as many clinical students, med students as possible. My goal for this year, 2019, is huge. Is to get this channel to 25,000 subscribers. Right now, I think we're at about almost 1,200. So it is going to be a 25x jump to get there. So I'm going to need your help to make sure to share this, at least help me do things such as like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're not. And yeah, just help me grow this channel to help me help more med students just like you or pre-meds. But again, like I said, I'll stick around to the end to answer some more questions if you guys have them. But go get those honors, and remember that link is in the description. If you want that free training, I'm going to likely be doing that in the next few days on the 9 steps to just crushing all your clinical rotations. Click the link and help me kind of create the clinical guide. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this PowerPoint. Hopefully this presentation style is a little bit better than just me talking for an endless amount of time. So if you guys enjoy this, just let me know in the comment section below, like thumbs up or say, presentations for the win, so that way I can do more of this in the future. But I will stay around for the questions. But remember, like, subscribe to the channel, and let's see what other questions I can get in the chat box. So Adrian says, during second year, how would you recommend starting on doing with journal articles? Prep work and bringing them up during space learning. So Adrian's basically asking, how would I incorporate presenting journal articles as a second year? Should he basically look into them, prep them up, and then share them? It basically depends on your goal, honestly, bud. If you enjoy reading journal articles, then by all means do it. And if you get a good opportunity to share it, then do. But if you're just reading the journal article to want to share it later, I don't know how much actually results you'll get out of it. Comment down below. Just let me know kind of what you want to get out of prepping a journal article, unless it's already something that your school already does. But you don't need to be really doing that as a second year unless it's like part of your curriculum, or unless you guys do that on your case-based learning, because usually you'll just learn the material that the school provides you, and that's usually to suffice. Journal articles usually are more kind of effective when you start to get into a real life patient population, where not every patient is going to get, or not every patient is going to get the treatment, or not every treatment is going to work for every patient. So that's really when journal articles become effective. So you don't need it for a second year, but if there's something particular that you want to bring it up, I mean, by all means, just remember, don't do it in a snobby way, because then you're already developing bad habits. But I'm sure you're not one of those students. So yeah, read journal articles. They're really helpful, but it's going to be more effective for third year. But I'm going to at least wrap up the stream. I'll go ahead and go around the chat box for those of you guys that want to ask some more questions. But thank you guys so much again for attending what I like to consider like my first live event. I've done other ones, but this is kind of a first presentation live session with a specific training, and I'm going to be doing more in this in the future. So make sure you give it a thumbs up, share this with whoever you can. Jay, you'll share this on your class Facebook page. Dude, you're awesome. Thank you so much. That means the world to me. I mean, having this small community, I know y'all's names, seen you guys throughout the email, so thanks for attending. If you're watching the replay, thanks for making it to the end. But I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your evening, day, morning, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, guys.